salutations. Welcome to a conversation with Colin Was Right. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined by my friend Adam Boyes.
Hello, Colin.
CEO of Iron Galaxy Studios.
That is correct.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
We said it beforehand, but I appreciate, GDC is very busy.
Yeah.
You are the CEO of an established developer and therefore have other things to do. And so I'm sure, this is probably the least important thing you're doing this week.
No, it's awesome. I love chatting. I mean, we had some great back and forth on Twitter. So let's follow it up with some hashing out, chopping it up in person.
Some substantive conversation.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
For people that are just tuning in or haven't watched the other episodes of A Conversation with Colin Was Right, basically the idea is I put these episodes out there, I get feedback, positive or negative, from people in the industry, and I'm bringing them on to either take me to task and tell me why I'm wrong, or we can reinforce ideas or challenge them or whatever we want to do. The specific thing that I wrote it down here that Adam and I were arguing about was, so not really arguing, but having a back and forth about was the second episode, which is there are too many games.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of insight into this because you were head of third-party relations or productions, right? Third-party relations, right?
Yeah.
At PlayStation, you were the VP of that,
right?
Before you went to Iron Galaxy. And so my contention on that episode was that there are way too many games. There's a glut of games. It's bad for the good games and even the mediocre games. You seem to disagree with that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. All right. So at a high level.
I guess to rewind it back. So at a high level, I think your perspective was more of there are too many games and the quality is sort of way too broad, right?
Right.
And so when you say there's too many games, I think in a perfect world, in a perfect construct, all games are amazing and great and wonderful and are provided to the people. And there's no issues or problems. And I think your perspective was like, they're just junk everywhere. It's like I think you mentioned like it's like a flea market of games or something like that, which I think is fair because in a perfect world, I'd love to just have stuff that I only like. And that was my first feedback when I retitled it. I said, retitled, Colin only wants games that he likes on PlayStation. That would be
preferable.
Yeah.
The Last of Us Part 17 would be nice, etc.
The Colin curated corner, right? That's all C's though.
Yeah, it's all the alliteration's important.
Yeah, I mean, because your perspective was what? I think your proposal was, why doesn't PlayStation spend a pile of money to just have a team of people that are just looking at stuff to make sure that nothing that you don't like gets released, right?
That's basically the premise. Well, my premise was because I was talking specifically. I had Jeremy Dunham on yesterday. And we were talking about he's the VP of Psionics, but he used to be the editor in chief of IGN, so he has a critical background. And I was asking him. And this was the argument I think that I put in the episode, and I might have put in other episodes, is we used to argue about how reviewing a critical eye towards a game is pretty much completely subjective. And I agree with that, obviously. I was a critic. But is there no sliver of objectivity? That was kind of was kind of like, even if the pie chart was, the circumference of the pie chart, 99% subjectivity, is there not a slice of objectivity? Is this game playable? That game, it's funny because the game A Life with Black Tiger was released like a week or two after that episode came out, which for some people strangely reinforced the idea, and it just got circulated a lot. And I'm like, if someone looked at this game, certainly this isn't up to snuff to be on the PlayStation Network, right? In my mind, is that? But your contention is.
Well, here's the thing. So I thought that I would always know what was good and what wasn't. That was sort of like when I was at Capcom, I ran product development there. And I remember Dear Esther came through, and they were looking for a publisher. And I was like, who wants to play a walking simulator, right? So we passed on it, and it went on to sell like 1 million units within the first month. And I remember coming in the next day and being like, I officially recuse myself from being the sort of harbinger of quality anymore because I don't know what people like. And so the sort of counterpoint to your point is more so like things are always going to change and evolve. Like right now, for example, we at Iron Galaxy, we ported over 7 Days to Die to console, right? From a visual perspective, that game doesn't sort of compete with the big AAA games. But the game has sold a ton of units, both on PC and console. And that's a game where it's like the quality wouldn't maybe pass some people's muster, but people are loving the mechanics of it. So the question I wanted to have back to you was, what would the criteria be, aside from, because the subjectivity, objectivity, my perspective is like, if you just step out of that conversation and allow the free market to sort of like be the harbinger of quality, then usually things will work out. And I think your perspective was more so, hey, if we had a bunch of people there, then I wouldn't have to ever worry about crap. Right. But then there's always gonna be things that you're gonna hate.
Right, certainly, and that's where to me, like, I try to remove the subjective angle, even though it's an essential, and I think might only be the only angle. Like I don't know that the objectivity exists. Right. The contention is, that's why I was like, we'll have a panel, like almost a jury that doesn't have to have unanimous saying or whatever, but just like 8 or 10 of them say like, yeah, this is, if just a few people are like, what is this?
Yeah.
What value does this serve? We have data suggesting games like this maybe don't sell or whatever it might be. I don't know what the angle is.
Right.
But my contention is that most games would pass this muster because it's not like, Dan Edelman brought up the example of Minecraft, I think, when we were talking with him and how people passed on that game and didn't understand.
Totally.
I'm like, yes, that is a bad miss for a game that sold 120
But at the time, if you look
copies.
at the pre-alpha, it was janktastic. It was like super. Like I remember buying it for $10 when it was originally $10 in pre-alpha, and it was I think under 1 million units at the time. And I was kind of like, huh? Right? I'm like, I can dig. That's cool. But what else? Like a lot of the features weren't in there yet.
Right.
So I think that the challenge that I sort of push back on is that you have this crew, and the challenge with any platform is that then you have to, if you're going to have some sort of qualifications above and beyond the TRCs, because obviously TRC adherence or XR adherence or any of the sort of like requirements, which are basically for the viewers at home, those are the requirements that people need to adhere to release. So no crashes. Like I get that if a game crashes every day,
right.
that's a problem, right? That needs to be fixed. And usually if that happens in a shipped game, most likely the platforms know about it and the developer's trying to fix it. But when it comes to just sort of quality, and you talk about that blurring the line between objectivity and subjectivity, in order to do that, that council needs to be super clear on what is and isn't okay. And the problem is, as soon as opinions get involved and it's a jury and voting, then it is automatically subjective because it's opinions. And in that scenario, much like the ESRB, they never publish their what qualifies for different ratings, right? They do that to obscure things. I mean, recently on Twitch, right? I can't remember the name of that game where they had been banned from Twitch, but the developer couldn't figure out why, because he's like, this game has this part, this game has that part, and because Twitch doesn't publish those requirements, because then you get into censorship mode. So that's sort of why, again, in a perfect world, I think that would be a great idea if it worked. And if you could publish those requirements and they were super clear, but because you don't want to blur the line between censorship, you have to keep it obtuse, and that I think adds a bunch of levels of complexity and challenge that sort of have a trickle down effect where developers then submit their stuff, they get denied, and you're like, why? It's just not good. And you're like, what part?
Right.
There's not enough, I don't know, coins in level 2. So that's what I want to go back to you of like, in perfect world scenario, I love the concept, but how do you actually execute on that?
Yeah,
how do you build that level of requirements?
I guess that's true in a sense, because if it's going to be a closed market as opposed to an unfettered market, then there needs to be some sort of reliable criteria. And I do understand the notion that a team works on a game as assuming that it would get to a platform in which they can't publish there.
Right.
But my feedback on that is this. It's like, it's a nebulous idea right now. It's not going to happen. So I haven't like delved too deeply into writing up the 50-page thing I'm going to give to Sony about what I want.
So it's easy to come up with an idea, Colin, is what you're saying, but it's really hard to implement.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Make sure.
This company is a huge example of that.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it's like this kind of came from the place we every week on PS I Love You we go through the PlayStation blog, the drop posting, and it's actually become a running joke on the show because
I hear you guys reading through like the write-ups, which is totally like,
read every one of them.
Did you
week.
just Google Translate this?
Yeah, I'm like, so this game will sell 500 copies or 1,000 copies or 2,000 copies.
Sure. And that developer's grandma will buy it and will be happy to contribute to that person's college fund.
But on a platform with 55 million, 56 million, 57 million people, the counter example I used on Twitter to someone was they were like, well, because it seemed, the insinuation seems to be not necessarily from you, but from some, like any game should be able to go on there. Very App Store or Steam-like kind of qualitative approach to saying like it just exists and you can put it up and it's not a problem. And my argument to that is like, well, doesn't that hurt the products that are even mediocre, nonetheless good on the platform, because everything's being obscured the more that's on there. The search tools will bury everything eventually. And also, to take that to the logical conclusion, I use the example of Walmart and deodorant, where I'm like, or it's shampoo, where I'm like, well, these guys made shampoo, and like the Walmart, it's a free market. Walmart's got to put it on the shelf next to everything. But I'm like, there's only so much space.
Yeah. And FDA approvals, and also 80% of them are owned by Procter & Gamble.
Sure.
Right?
Yes. Okay. But my example was, if I was Pantene or something like that, and I'm like, and we only have a very finite amount of shelf space, and we get a little truncated because they're getting this next thing on that's maybe not a quality product. Everyone's like, but what is the rationale here? Now I'm going to lose out but my product sells reliably.
Right.
This product sucks. And you're just putting it there because it exists? Because that's basically the argument. And I don't...
Well, I think the difference is, though, there's infinite shelf space on a digital platform, right? And if things... we rely on recommendation engines. We rely on store bubbling things up that are good and start to sort of build momentum. And there's a lot of analytics that go on to all the platforms of like, hey, let's track Twitter discussions around a certain game and let's have that one on the recommended or sort of push that one up to be more aware, people made more aware. If a game comes out like a fart in church in the corner, like the only way you can find it is through putting in the name of the game character by character, right? And so it's not actually taking away from anyone else. And that's the thing that I don't understand. If like in a world where there's infinite shelf space, there is no harm. The only harm could be a misleading a consumer. And that sort of goes back to every consumer, I think, should do their homework. Every gamer should do their homework before they make a purchase. And if they don't, then that's sort of, buyer beware. And so in a world where you're just trying to make it so the infinite shelf space is limited. I mean, that's the best part about digital. And it usually won't make it physical because no publisher would actually distribute it,
right? Because
there's not a real market there. And that's sort of where the market economics, sort of net out of like, okay, then the game maybe shouldn't have been made. But maybe that guy or girl built that game over 4 years, and that 1,000 units paid for their computer or paid for their first semester at school. And I've seen it happen of small teams sell 2,000, 5,000 units, and that's like, holy shit, now I can pay off my student debt. And so, I don't know, to take that away from people, to create this sort of like obscure and opaque qualifications that then would create, I think, a ripple effect. Because you think about the qualifications that you would have to not publish, because all platforms have requirements that are very requirements that are published. And then they have these sort of like other things, like Steam Greenlight even, right? They're taking things down and people are like, why? I don't know. And they're even trying to change their process to make it easier. So you think about the requirement team you'd have to build, then it would have to be purposely opaque. So therefore you create sort of stress and strife across the whole development industry, aside from the big dogs, right? Who are like, hey, if the next Far Cry is coming out, they'll probably get through, right? And then on top of that, you have the enforcement team, and then you have the meetings that have to go around the discussions. And so when you talked about, you said the $2 to $3 million and the 8 to 10 person, the ripple impact is actually more millions of dollars of strife, trouble, time. And so that's what my counterpoint back to you was like, or else we just say buyer beware, right? The other thing that I wanted to posit to you is that like in a world where, like, what are the 5 things right now you would want PlayStation to improve, for example? Or top 3? Like, what are the top 3 things right now that you want on the platform?
Oh, name changing would be number
name changing.
One. Better curation, I think, just on when you go to the PlayStation Store, just seeing a different splash every so often. And actually, some of these like access programs that Xbox is doing, I think, are really cool. Not only backwards compatibility, but EA access and all that. Now they're doing their own kind of program.
So all those things, I think, are totally valid features that would be great to invest in, but that would be the same 8 to 10 people because it's a zero-sum game, right? Your head count has to stay flat. So in order to do something like this, you have to, it's at a cost, right? So the new 8 people that you're hiring on to do this new sort of curation feature could have been working on something else. So that's another thing that when you were posting that up, I'm like, again, perfect world. Of course, we'd love this. Of course.
So to utopia.
And I'd like a boat. I'd like a boat that I cruise around Lake Michigan. But I don't have one, and I'm not getting one anytime soon. So I think that's the other thing that I want to come on the show and talk about. Like when you think about a company that has a fiduciary responsibility to the street when they're publicly traded, right? They basically have to make decisions that are going to increase revenue, increase sort of more products, increase the ability to make new money and have new features that bring more. Like I love the idea of more discoverability and more dynamic stuff because then it's like now more things are getting bubbled to the top and now you have more games that can become the next, Firewatch. And so when you look at a company, right, that's the other point I was trying to make on Twitter was like, instead of trying to create more policies and requirements and procedures that inhibit growth, if that same amount of energy and effort is put into creating growth or taking sort of procedures away to allow for people to be more creative and try new things and add in, other features, I think that should be the focus, right? And so that's the whole thing. Of course, again, utopia, beautiful. I love it. But the practicality of being a big company, and it's not just PlayStation, right? I speak on behalf of all the platforms out there when it comes to like, they want to focus on growth and spurring more awesome stuff in the future versus inhibiting and holding it back. Because that's kind of what it used to be. It used to be a very closed system with opaque rules and guidelines. Now it's a lot more open. And you're right, we can discuss all day long about where the line should sit, but right now I feel like it's in a really good place.
So would you? So I guess what you're saying is that it's somewhat of a fool's errand to assume, because I guess my overarching like kind of umbrella assumption is that if a small amount of money for Sony is invested in something like curation or something like making quality control, where a person might be able to rely more on PlayStation Network to be able to just discover a game that they can rely on a little bit more to be better,
right?
Then over time, people rely more on PlayStation Network than say Xbox Live or certainly Steam and the App Store. They'd be like, well, I'm less likely to get fucked here,
right?
But that's somewhat of a fool's errand, you're saying, because it will stymie creativity or have a chilling effect, which I think is a fair point. But my question is, then what marketplace digitally is like the ideal one? Because can we agree that the App Store is too much? For instance,
yeah,
like a third of gaming revenue comes from the App Store, over 750,000 games, of which I would assume half of the revenue comes from literally probably 25 games.
Right.
So what is the point of even having the other, I remember I couldn't find it when I was doing the piece, but I remember reading on Gamma Sutra or Games Industry Biz or whatever that they were saying something like you could cut out the bottom 50% or something like that of the App Store and not affect revenue whatsoever.
Right.
And so that would just seem to help the consumer. So so we can agree that that's not the perfect place to be.
No.
But is it more like Steam that you like?
Well, I think the thing is, right now there lives a set of requirements on all the different home consoles, and the requirements are, they're lengthy, right? So to adhere to those, to get a dev kit, there's enough, I think, friction for people that are really serious and want to take a serious investment to make a game. With an App Store, I need an iPhone and a computer. I can use a Chromebook, I can use a Mac or whatever. So the barrier to entry to be serious about game development on PC is $300. Basically, that's it.
Right.
And to rely on Steam, now that they're even changing it, they haven't published sort of what pricing they want to sort of get on their platform to be able to sort of go through the new approval process. But they've, I think, said up to $5,000. And that is roughly the equivalent of the investment that you need to make to get your dev kits and get registered and get your company set up. So right now there lives enough friction, I think. And you're right. We can argue all day long about should it be less? Should all dev kits be free for everyone always in perpetuity, just so more people can come on? And I don't think there is a perfect utopia out there. I don't think any one marketplace is the perfect one, but I think consoles are in a really good place. I think there's enough great stuff coming out there. There's enough freedom. I think the people, the suits have gotten out of the way enough for things to be able to shine. And sometimes you're going to have a turd that you don't like. And that's just sort of I think, a pretty good place. You're right. The App Store is just everything, always, everywhere. And that's where the buyer beware is even on Extreme Alert. Steam is the same thing. If we invest more of the time and effort into smarter recommendation engines, listening or watching what people that we trust and respect are playing and watching. I mean, nowadays, when I find a new, like a Netflix series I want to watch, I just go to Google and enter top 10 or whatever, and I'm usually disappointed. And if I go Justin Roiland the other day is hey, I really like The Magicians on Netflix, and I was I was just looking for a new series. I'm watching, I'm okay, yeah, it's like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets sort of Harry Potter. Oh, it's cool, it's fine, right? But I'd rather watch something that my friends play and watch than a rando. And so I think if more effort was put into that sort of thing, the curation stuff and recommendation and more dynamic stuff, so it's you like this, you like that, you like that, and there's some of that already. I think it's a lot better than trying to stymie and prevent and create more sort of criteria.
I have one question for you that I think you'll be able to give great insight into. Because of this idea that Sony is a little more unfettered now, or Microsoft will be a little more unfettered now to not stymie growth and obviously not scare their developer partners over, especially in the independent space. In my mind, based on certification and all these kinds of things, and kind of just the hoops people have to jump through, even just the corresponding through emails with indies from Sony's side or whatever, is it not fair to assume that Sony is actually losing money on some, not a lot, but some of these games? If a game doesn't pass muster, if you have two people just randomly working on a game for a few days, even just to get it in the back end and certified and whatever, right, trophies work, whatever it is, and then it sells 500 copies, doesn't Sony lose money? And is that all in the name of the unfettered marketplace to make sure?
I mean, I think it's all in the name. This is across all platforms. I think it's all in the name of creating a robust ecosystem. And there's a cost of doing business, right? When all the R&D goes into developing a new console, for example, you have to recoup that in some way, shape, or form. So the performance of the sales of the games across all the ecosystem play against that. But in order to, the funny thing is, if you wanted to prevent, it would probably cost you more money to try and force all those rules and regulations than it would to back away a little bit.
That's an intriguing.
And let that thing sort of flow freely and let people say, don't buy this game because it's fucking garbage, right? So that's the thing of like, is if we live in a world of buyer beware, and then people are like, damn it, I shouldn't have bought that when I was drunk at 3 a.m. Okay, yeah, I learned my lesson. And I think it is that balance, but I think it's in a good place. And I don't think a lot of things need to change personally.
Fair enough. You give me a lot to think about. I want, well, how much we have? We have actually a good amount of time left. I want to, if you don't mind, shift because you're here. You're smart. You know a lot about games. Obviously, very smart. You're very smart industry mind, which I've invited on all week for this series. And so I want to ask you some of the similar questions I've asked others because I'm curious about your perspective, specifically about the health of the industry and the health of the different platform holders. Yeah. What do you obviously I think you have maybe a little endemic bias because you worked at Sony, but. Yeah. I just did the last Colin was right about kind of their meteoric success with PlayStation 4 and how this system is actually quietly, it's sold a lot and they make noise about that, but it's actually quietly creeping into the top 5 best-selling consoles of all time. And will certainly eclipse PS3 and Xbox 360, I think, which is incredible. What do you think of that? Because I was so fascinated when I was doing research about it. I'm like, man, I remember these think pieces when I was at IGN from 2009, 2010, 2011.
Consoles are dead.
Yeah, exactly. And I just did a Google search, like a criteria search. It was like, literally, consoles are dead. Comma dying,
right?
And then 2009 to 2011, and found all of these articles. Did it surprise you too? Because I remember being like, I couldn't believe. I remember saying at the time, like, if that's true, then I'm out. Like, I can't. I'm just not a mobile gamer. I'm not a social gamer. This is how I play. So, what do you think of all that?
It freaked me out big time because I was like, when I joined PlayStation, I hadn't been disclosed on PS4. I had no idea. I just went there because I saw some, I had dealt with them a lot from the outside. And I was like, well, I think we could do a better job from a just relationship standpoint, developers and stuff like that. And getting in on board, right? I had the same worries. I'm like, well, this is a good at bat, right? Let's launch. If it comes out, it doesn't do well, then it's like, at least I could take credit or be part of the team that buried consoles forever, right? And then I think it was like, once we did the announcement in February of, what was it? Was it 2013, the announcement?
Yep. February 2013.
And then you just the electricity started, right? And it was palpable. You could feel it across, and I was like, we good, right? And then with Microsoft coming out, and then there was just this fervor and this hunger. And I think what had happened in the background is the mobile boom and the Facebook gaming boom was the best thing to ever happen to consoles. Because what it did is it created more discussion and more self-awareness. And I think the term gamer sort of started blurring way more than ever before. And so people that have been playing Candy Crush or been playing Farmville are now like, hey, what's on this console stuff? Because there was that gap of probably 5 to 8 years that they might have not have bought a PS3 or a 360. And so when it started hitting, it was like, oh, this is happening. Will we have enough for day one? Holy crap, this is way bigger than anyone thought. And then there was that sort of E3 with Jack on stage where it was like, okay, let's go. Let's go.
One of the great E3 moments, I think, of all time, that conference.
But it was pinch me the whole time. Pinch me. I never personally projected it to be that strong and that robust. And then it was just like, okay, let's hop on the canoe and the river's going super fast. So
and of course your video with Shu, which became a viral sensation.
It did
in the months leading up to PlayStation 4's launch. What about at Iron Galaxy, you guys obviously work pretty intimately with Microsoft.
Yep.
I made a video 2 weeks ago making the case that Xbox One is in a healthy place too. It's just optically not in a good place because PS4 is so meteoric. It's similar to. I mean, maybe not similar because GameCube and the original Xbox weren't the biggest selling things, but when PS2 is selling, that's at 150 million, it makes your 25 million look meager.
Right.
This is not nearly as dramatic. They're being outsold about 2 to 1. Do you feel good about the Xbox brand too? Because I feel like it's a little unfair, and I actually kind of feel bad for Microsoft in a way because I feel like they're making some great strides and good ideas with backwards compatibility and the access programs and stuff, but people seem to be beating up on the console simply because look at PS4, and I'm like, well, they're both healthy.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the thing is that everything that's happening on all the consoles and platforms, I think, is good for the rest of them because with that thirst, when we were the underdogs, right? Like everyone, I think most people counted out PlayStation, right? With this next gen, they're like, wow, 360 was so ahead of PS3, even though in the end, PS3 actually outsold 360, which not a lot of people know.
With a year less time on the market, which is interesting.
And so they were like, well, it was too hard and all that stuff. And that's where I think like when Ouya got announced, like we're dev friendly, I'm like, you don't even know what we're cooking up, right? And so that was shocking. But all the things that every platform keeps doing, new programs like Microsoft just announced their sort of 100 games for $10 a month. Those are all things that I think spur discussion and competition that are healthy, right? We always say like a rising tide brings everyone up. And as a byproduct then, like Nintendo, for example, which had been well known to not be super dev friendly, I think there was some pockets of around the Wii U, them being a lot more friendly with indie developers. But this time around, they changed at a very fundamental level for the Switch to become more open and transparent, and their outreach increased incredibly well. And so that's because of, I think, some of the stuff we were doing and Chris Charla and the ID at Xbox guys were doing. And so all those things that keep happening, I think, is great. And so, and even when I was inside, like the whole, like, we sold one extra than this one, it's like, but if we're all winning and new content's coming and some things are exclusive and some things aren't, it's good for everyone because it's pushing the industry forward. It's pushing that competition. People that are developing games now have more opportunity to make money by selling things than ever before. And that's incredible. Like, that's something that everyone should be proud of. So the minutia of, like, you know, when you're at a platform, you got to do the raw, our team's the best team on the planet. But when you start to take a step back, all that stuff is great because it's creating new market opportunities and increasing the overall revenue of the industry, which means it's better than ever. And it is. Like, being on the development side now, I can unequivocally say, like, I knew it was good when I was at PlayStation. Now I know it's even better. It's so healthy. And there was more developers this year that I've seen ever before. I don't know. I didn't actually count. But, and everyone's getting business. There's more money to be spent. There's no more new companies and more investors coming in. So it's amazing. It's incredible.
Well, you brought up Nintendo, and I'm interested in what you think of. I mean, obviously the Switch actually comes out today when we're recording this. Yeah. It'll go up next week. But and I was disappointed. My Amazon email was like, "Oh, it'll come tomorrow." I'm like, "All right, cool."
I know I ordered from Best Buy and I haven't gotten any notifications. So
it'll get there. When
I was gonna play. I want to start playing Zelda tomorrow morning with my kids, and I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's disappointing because it's at 98 on Metacritic, which is incredible. Yeah, totally. 95 for The Last of Us. For context, that's a really incredible space to be in. What do you think, though? I mean, Switch aside, which seems like we'll talk about Switch because I'm curious what you think about it.
Sure.
But what is it? As Microsoft and Sony kind of seem to be doing fine and very well, actually, as we were saying, there seems to be an inverse relationship with the way Nintendo is performing, at least in the hardware space or in the console space with Wii U. What do you make of that company right now in terms of? It seems to me, I guess it's going to be they're going to be beholden to Switch's success, or failure depending on how it goes. But to me, I'm a little frustrated with them because I see this possibility. I mean, it's been talked about for years where I'm like, man, if you just, as trite as it is, it's like if you just put Mario on PS4 and Xbox One, man, you guys would just fucking rake it in.
Which is what they did in mobile.
Yep, yeah,
right?
and they did. You know, I appreciate their experimentation with Miitomo and all these kinds of things, and obviously Pokemon Go and Super Mario Run. Yeah. But what do you make of the Wii U experience and why that was so different from? You know, even though it was a little early to market compared to, it was kind of like a Dreamcast, in terms of coming out a little bit early. But what do you make of it?
I like what I love about Nintendo is they're the most predictably unpredictable company, and everything they do, I think, is about disruption and having a point of view and sticking with it. And so that's why I give them, like, I'll never forget, like, coming up to the Wii launch, and we were all like, that's cute, right? The industry at large, even though we were making some games when I was at Midway, we're like, this thing is adorable. And then it comes out, you're like, whoa, first time we all played, Wii Party, right?
The Wii Sports?
Wii Sports, yeah. Yep. And it was like, holy shit, this is happening, right? With Wii U, I think they just made some bets, and I don't think it paid off as much as they wanted it to. And so what I love about Switch is that they're trying something new. They're not trying to chase. Their IPs are strong as like if we look at like quintessential like Disney properties, right? And I think that's cool. And I think if they want to use that stuff to drive their own hardware innovation and try new things, and playing Zelda on an airplane is like a dream come true in this sort of higher resolution. So I'm excited for it. I think what I love about them is they're so ballsy to be able to they're like, here's what we're doing. And everyone's like, okay, take it or leave it. Call it what you want. If you want to call it a home console, if you want to call it a handheld, we're not going to define it. So you guys figure out. And I love that. Then when they see sort of things catching on, they'll lean more into that aspect of it. So I think they're cool.
Do you think that Nintendo IP has the potential to carry something like that into higher numbers than, say, what Wii U or a little bit loftier, like what GameCube did? Because I see that relationship with the Wii's the outlier. The relationship has always been down with consoles since the NES. None of their consoles have sold as well as the NES. The SNES was number 2, the N64 number 3, and so on and so forth, with the exception of the Wii, which was mainstream outlier.
Yeah.
And because I've made this argument on some of our videos that, and I'm curious what you think about it, that clear, like everyone's like, well, you don't buy Nintendo hardware for third-party games. You don't buy Nintendo hardware for indies. But I'm like, but then why does it exist? Because people didn't buy the Wii U for the Nintendo exclusives either. Is it possible that this generation could be different, that a game as good as Zelda, maybe this Mario game that comes out in the fall really is fantastic, that this thing sells 20, 30, 40 million units based only on Nintendo platforms?
I think we're all hopeful, right? Everyone hopes that it's successful. I do think the third party angle is a hard one, right? Because you need to convince them, and you need to make sure you're going to show a robust market opportunity. And then when they got on board, then all of a sudden now you have hundreds of millions of more dollars of investment into content. And without that, it's definitely more challenging. As far as a carry, I mean, I'm not the business guy at Nintendo. I'm sure they have a lot of smart people that do the math of like, we need to sell X amount of copies over Y amount of lifetime to make sure that we recoup. And the IPs that we do will carry it. And the revenue coming in from Super Mario Run, the stuff we're doing on iOS will also help carry. And, I got to sort of trust those people that they know what they're doing. And then sometimes they hit the lightning fire like the Wii, and other times not so much with the Wii U. But I think we're all hopeful. It's hard though. It's hard when you don't have an Activision EA like heavily behind something. But I do think that they have some cool support. I mean, the Bethesda stuff in Skyrim is pretty rad.
Yeah, it was random actually. Which was cool,
yeah. And but man, I'm just like, I will buy that stuff for the first party stuff till the end of time, and I'll buy every first party, like all the Mario stuff, all the Zelda stuff, in perpetuity. And so maybe that's enough. Maybe they're not looking for people buying 8 games a year. It's more like a 2 to 3 games a year. And I'll have it anyway, right? Just like I had the Wii U and the Wii, and then played the stuff that I wanted to. So I don't think it might not become the core console in everyone's home that everyone's always playing, but I think that's okay nowadays, right? At home, I have an Amazon Fire on one of my TVs. I have 2 Apple TVs in the thing. I have my PS4 or PlayStation View in one room, and I sort of like go through depending on like, oh, let's rent a thing on iTunes, and depending on the room we're in. So I think we're in this new world of like, and of course, not everyone can do that, but you go to what you love, and if you love first-party stuff, the Nintendo, then you'll be happy as a clam.
One of the last things I want to ask you, because I think you'll have interesting insight into this as well, having worked at so many publishers and hardware manufacturers, and now kind of being in control of the destiny of a pretty prominent developer.
Yeah.
What do you make of, and this is an interesting question, a weird question, but what do you make of the way games are coming out now in terms of release scheduling? Greg and I were talking about this the other day, where like just think about this year alone with just Horizon and Zelda and Mass Effect coming out in Q1.
Yeah.
And a game like Shadow of Mordor or War, what is it? The Mordor 2, whatever the fuck it's called, is coming out in August.
Yeah.
And like even Metal Gear Solid 5 coming out September 1st and all these kinds of things. And then Christmas doesn't really seem to be that, like Sony's really not even hit with an exclusive for Christmas over and over again. What do you make of this kind of expanding calendar? Because I'm really intrigued by it. We don't have any time to rest. No rest for the weary anymore.
Right. But that's good. I think that's the best. Like I remember
think so too.
When I first I think it was Dead Rising. I feel like started the trend. Dead Rising 1, I think, came out in like a February timeframe, and everyone's like, that's not right. And as we saw the success of that, and new IPs of like this January, I love January as a launch window because people are thirsty, right? They got their new consoles. They probably powered through a lot of stuff over the break. They want some new stuff. Love February even more. March, I think, is a great one too because it's quarter end for a lot of fiscal year end for a lot of people. So they want to get their sell-ins in so they can sort of report to the street by April 1 that they did really well. And then as it sort of sells through, they can sort of report that revenue for that year. And now I think like it used to be like you can't release in summer because kids are out of school. I'm like, nobody cares anymore. And gamers are so diverse in age and range that, and we actually started, when I was at Capcom, I'll never forget, we launched Street Fighter HD Remix Thanksgiving, I think Wednesday or Thursday of Thanksgiving, and everyone's like, you can't do that. I'm like, people are at home, they're with their family, they want to play each other in a game that is very core to their heart. And nobody did that. Nobody released like back then, especially digitally. You avoid the plague, right? And so I love the idea now of putting twists on things and like, hey, Easter weekend, people are at home, right? In some areas, right? And so I love it. I love that we have this thing where people can get hype and be crazy about a game, whether it's June or February. I think it's awesome. And then I even think that games like Hitman redefining the delivery mechanism of like now it's every month or month and a half where big content drops. Destiny did a great job of like every 2 months coming back. Games as a hobby, I think, is super, super cool. So I'm jazzed because it gives me something new. I mean, it means our backlogs are totally fucked.
Oh, yeah.
But it just means that, like, I like it because it spreads it out a little bit more. And now we're seeing games able to shine that might have, if they were in that glut of holiday, would have been buried. People at holiday, I don't know anyone that's going to buy more than 3 games at max. I think around holiday, I usually try to limit it to 2, right? Buying 3, we're at $180 plus tax. Buying 4, we're like almost at $300. That's the cost of a console. And so to have people just trying to come out at that time just because I heard it was cool on the internet, or that's what people used to do 5 years ago, I think it's dumb. Sit on your game, polish it up, hit a February launch, and boom. Like Mass Effect coming up, I'm so psyched.
Yeah,
so
I'm psyched for it too. And I wonder like when the convention, like that was conventionalism for so long that I wonder when that could have been broken. And everyone was.
I think
so
earlier.
afraid.
I think it would have been earlier. I think with the sort of strength of digital platforms, that part of it I think is carrying a lot because now it doesn't matter, right? You don't have to worry about like, is it cold outside when people are going to buy stuff? It's just like, when is it available and can I pre-download it? That thing I think has changed a lot too. So I think we could have broken it before. I think it's great for everyone. Retailers like it because then there's more sort of activity and traffic on a longer sort of scale. I think launching a console and the timing that Nintendo did. I mean, I feel bad for the guys at Nintendo launching a platform the week of GDC, right?
Yeah.
And they're in meetings and they're like, oh, gotta go. Yeah. But I think it's awesome. I think it's healthy.
You brought something up interesting that I guess we'll close on, which was when I had Jeremy Dunham on from Psyonix talking about Rocket League as a service, as a game, kind of a persistent product. And he made the case that it's just pro-consumer, that there's plenty of capital to be made by just leaning on a game. You guys obviously have things like Killer Instinct and stuff like that are persisting and very popular without having to release the new $60 game every year and annualize.
And we did Elder Scrolls Online for consoles as well. Right. So yeah, that I think that's great too because it gives people like I talked about the hobby stuff. I think what Destiny did and the Division did was taught us that some people just want to play the same thing. Much like I think Skyrim actually originally sort of taught us this. Like some people want to dig 100, 200 hours into something. Some people don't just want to chow through 8 hours and then the next 8 hours of the next game and the next 8 hours. And so this game's a hobby thing. I think actually harkens back to the World of Warcraft days early on and EverQuest and stuff like that, where it's like people want to dig 200, 300, 400 hours into stuff. And now we have all these survival games too, where people are dumping 1,000 hours into these games as well. So that content, that sort of live service, I think is great. Be able to continually monetize things in an organic and way that feels good to the gamers and players, I think is cool. And what I love about, we used to be freaked out by microtransactions. It used to be the worst word on the planet. And now it's the norm because we feel like it's kind of like going to concerts. You love a band, you buy their album, you go to the concert, you buy their shirt, you buy the poster. It's the equivalent, right? Now a game comes out, you're like, oh, I want to get some stuff. Like right now I'm playing Let It Die. I'm like $120 into it. If it was a $100 price tag on the wall, never would have bought it.
Right.
But I feel good about it. I feel good about the progress that I'm going through. And I think Overwatch is the same. People pay $60, they want more emotes, they want more outfits, and they're dumping more money into it. Hearthstone, I think, all these things is like, it's healthy and it's fine. And it doesn't make you feel like, I always said the Facebook games, I think always felt like, the analogy I use is like, you ever eat a huge bowl of popcorn and at the end you're like, I'm still hungry. That was like 2,000 calories. What have I done to my life? And that's what those Facebook games felt like. Because it was like, I don't want to click again. But there's this weird snaps in the back of my head saying I should click again. I need more clicks. And so now I think we found a beautiful balance in most games where the gamers feel good about the progress that they're getting and what they're getting for their money. Of course, the publishers and developers like it too. But I think it's cool. And it also creates constant accountability. If something's broken, back in the day, it had to be fixed by a recall.
Right.
Now, if something's broken, we can have a patch live in 7 days or 4 days, depending on the sort of the turn time. So I think it's awesome. I think that it creates ongoing accountability. You can't hide from things that are broken. You have to come back and fix things ongoing because you have an ongoing contract with the people that bought your game. And that to me is way better than I think where we were 15 years ago, where it's like, I hope I can trick them to get my money. And also, we need to kick this whole conspiracy of like, if they didn't release a review copy, it must be awful. Fuck that. Like,
well, Bethesda proved that wrong, I think, this year twice. Right?
I know. And so many people talk about it. And sometimes because like, no, there's live services. Like the time between submission and release is anywhere between 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks, right? That is a beautiful time to polish things and make things better. So like, if the game comes live and it doesn't have that new day one patch yet, and people are like, they're just ripping us off. I'm like, no, they're polishing stuff. They're making it better. They're like brandishing their weapons and sharpening them. Like, let's celebrate that. And then, or wait 2 more weeks to review it or another month. Because eventually it'll probably get good. And if not, people are going to jump down people's throats. And that going back to the part of like, what should the platform's role be? I mean, every platform's allowed to decide that. But when a game now isn't great upon launch, the gamers go after the creators and the publishers. And I think that's important to allow developers and the gamers to have that conversation and have that sort of like contract of quality with each other to create accountability and long-term improvements. And I think that's super healthy. And I'm super excited that we're here. And I think it's going to be the future.
Awesome. Well, Adam, I really appreciate your insight. You gave me a lot to think about. I think you changed my mind on some things too.
Ooh, Colin was wrong?
I hope you, I'm wrong way more than I let on. A broken clock is right twice a day. You can name a show after that. You could follow Adam, obviously, at AM Boyes, BOYES on Twitter if you want. And of course, keep an eye out for Iron Galaxy products coming to a console and PC near you. Adam, you're welcome with us anytime.
Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, thank you again for making time, because I know GDC, people out there don't really appreciate GDC is fucking hectic. And
it's a cluster.
And it's really a crazy time for devs and publishers and media types. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, stay tuned to Kind of Funny Games. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.